The classroom was quiet in that strange way that only exists when learning is supposed to be happening, but isn't. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, cutting the room into sharp lines of light and shadow, and Jason sat there staring at the board. Already knowing the answer, the professor was about to write, "A always now." That was the problem. Understanding had never been his enemy. Effort was, while other students scribbled notes frantically, Jason leaned back in his chair, confident that he could figure it out later. He always told himself that. Later became tomorrow, tomorrow became next week, and next week, quietly, turned into failure. Jason had grown up hearing the same sentence from teachers over and over again. Yes, smart, but he doesn't apply himself. At first, it sounded like a compliment, then it became a warning. By the time he reached university, it felt like a curse. He wasn't lost. He wasn't confused. He wasn't incapable. He was something far more dangerous. Comfortable with wasting his own potential, he would sit in lectures, understand everything, walk out, feeling fine, and then never open a book again. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't feel the urgency to prove anything. Intelligence became his excuse to delay responsibility. Every semester followed the same quiet collapse. It never started dramatically. The first week was full of optimism. Fresh notebooks, clean calendars, promises whispered to himself late at night. This time will be different. Then came the first, skipped morning. The alarm rang. The ceiling stared back at him, and a single thought made the decision for him. I'll catch up. The second skipped class felt easier. Bite forward skipping felt normal. The lectures became recordings he'd watch later, and the textbooks turned into background decorations. Panic only arrived when exams were close enough to hurt. By then, the damage was already done. Jason would lock himself in his room the night before a test, caffeine shaking in his hands, trying to force weeks of learning into a few desperate hours. He wasn't stupid enough to expect miracles, but some part of him hoped that intelligence alone would save him. It never did. The grades came back red and unforgiving. Another failure, another silent confirmation of what he was becoming. His GPA slipped lower each semester, not in one dramatic fall, but in small, humiliating steps. Academic probation followed, then warning emails. Polite at first, then cold. His parents called every week, their voices full of hope he no longer deserved. He lied bizarrely at first. It's going fine. Classes are hard, but I'm managing. Over time, the lies began to feel heavier than the truth. He could hear the sacrifices behind their questions, overtime shifts, postponed dreams, belief invested in a future he was quietly dismantling. What hurt most wasn't failing. It was knowing he didn't even try. Somewhere, deep inside, Jason understood that as long as he didn't fully commit, he could protect his ego. If he failed without trying, the story remained safe. I could have succeeded if I wanted to, but if I tried, really tried, and still failed, then there would be nowhere left to hide. So he stayed in limbo, half present, half absent, slowly watching opportunities slip away while convincing himself he was still in control. The breaking point came not with a failed exam, but with a phone call. His mother's voice trembled in a way he had never heard before. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She sounded tired. Defeated. The university had contacted them. Again, the words landed softly, but they cut deep. Maybe college isn't for you. It wasn't an insult. It was surrender. And somehow, that hurt more than anger ever could. That night, Jason sat alone in his room, surrounded by unfinished notebooks and unopened textbooks, and for the first time, he didn't distract himself. No phone, no music, no excuses, just the weight of what he had been choosing day after day. He realized something terrifying. No one had done this to him. Not his professors, not the system, not bad luck. He had been actively choosing the easier path every single morning, and those choices were adding up. The next day, almost on impulse, he walked into his professor's office. Professor Martinez had a reputation, demanding, direct, unimpressed by excuses. She didn't soften the truth when she spoke. She laid it out plainly. He was failing. Not barely. Completely. Attendance was almost non-existent. His exam scores were among the lowest in the class. Then she asked a question that didn't sound important at first, but would echo in his mind for years. "Why are you here?" Jason gave the answer he thought she wanted. "Grades. Probation." Fearing consequences, she stopped him gently, but firmly. That wasn't the question. She wasn't asking why he needed help. She was asking why now. Why? After weeks of silence, after months of avoidance, after years of patterns, had he finally shown up? She stood up, walked to the board, and wrote a sentence that made the room feel smaller. Who do you want to be? Not what career. Not what GPA. Not what outcome. Who? Jason didn't have an answer, and that scared him more than failure ever had. She explained something no one had ever said out loud. Benotring, Jason had been protecting an identity. The smart guy with wasted potential. It allowed him to fail without confronting his limits. It was safe, comfortable, and completely destructive. Then she challenged him. Was that really the person he wanted to be? Someone forever defined by what he could have done. That night, Jason sat at his desk with a blank sheet of paper. The question stared back at him. He wrote answers and crossed them out. Successful, too vague, proud, empty, strong, meaningless. Hours passed. At some point exhaustion stripped away the performance, and one sentence appeared: honest, uncomfortable, real. I want to be someone who doesn't give up on himself. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't impressive, but it was true. The next morning, the alarm rang at 7 a.m. His hand moved automatically toward the snooze button. Years of habit screamed for comfort. Then he remembered the sentence. He sat up, put his feet on the floor, and stood. That moment didn't feel powerful. It felt awkward, fragile, but it was different. Showing up didn't transform his life overnight. He still struggled. He still felt behind. Some days, he understood barely half the lecture. Bath, istayed. He sat in the front. He asked questions. He stopped negotiating with himself. Progress was slow, uneven, and deeply unglamorous. But for the first time, it was real. That semester ended with a C, not a victory by anyone else's standards. But for Jason, it was proof. Proof that he could change who he was being. Proof that discipline wasn't something you're born with. It was something you practice. From there, everything followed quietly. Same alarm. Same decision. Same identity. His grades improved, not because he became smarter, but because he stopped abandoning himself. By his final year, the student who once hid in the back of the room was teaching others. The kid on probation walked across the stage with honors and a scholarship waiting on the other side. But the real transformation wasn't the GPA. It was the answer to the question. And if you're listening to this now, maybe you recognize yourself in Jason. Not because you're failing, but because you're capable of more than you're allowing yourself to become. Let me ask you the same question. Not for motivation, not for comfort, but for truth. Who do you want to be? Because the moment you answer that honestly and choose to live it tomorrow morning, everything begins to change. If you or someone you know is struggling, remember that reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You can find resources and support in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.